The McLaren GT3 V2 is one popular steering wheel by Fanatec as it offers great quality and features for a reasonable price. However, many owners like myself agree on a certain aspect being a weak point, and that's the big orange shifter pedal. So I looked for an upgrade, and I think I found the perfect fit, the SimMakerZ magnetic pedal shifter set. Now you might be wondering why I consider the orange shifter pedal a weak point, and that's mostly because of the way it feels and behaves over time. It actually takes considerable effort to push every gear in, and if you're racing for longer than 1 or 2 hours, it means that your fingers can get really sore. At least that's what happened to me. The fingers really started to hurt at around 2 hours of driving, and it's pretty damn noisy. Every gear you shift in sounds like you're doing it with more than just one of your fingers. For some drivers, it also happened that the bolt that fixates the orange pedal on top of it gets loose over time, which results in the whole orange pedal wobbling around. So I started to look around for alternatives because the McLaren steering wheel from Fanatec is actually the favorite one I like to use for now. And I found a really cool solution from SimMakerZ. They actually offer a version for the V1 of the steering wheel and also for the V2. And I just got in touch and they were really happy to sponsor me one of their sets for this current review. Now the first thing that totally stands out to me is actually the build quality of those shifter pedals, including the bracket and the screws they deliver to you. It's everything fully made out of carbon fiber. It's very lightweight and it just looks awesome. But most importantly, it feels awesome. It's a full magnetic shifter replacement, also using magnetic shifter mechanism like the original orange pedal set. The cool feature actually here is that both pedal shifters feature each 2 screws that you can use to adjust the width of the pedals, meaning you can make it a tiny bit narrower or you can expand it a little bit depending on the size of your hands and the length of your fingers. Now regarding how do they feel, how do they sound, it's actually quite surprising. They are much quieter, at least it sounds like that while you are driving, than the orange pedal shifter from the original Fanatec McLaren steering wheel. The most amazing difference is the way it feels. It's so much easier to flick in the next gear or shift back into the first gear because it requires much less effort. It's so much easier to push. You can do it with just one finger. And for me, one of the biggest changes was that my fingers were not getting sore anymore. I could race 2 hours and every gear shift was absolutely precise, absolutely easy, felt very smooth. There were no errors, no mistakes in like double shifting or something, no missed shifts. And still, my fingers were not sore, my fingers were not hurting. It was just incredible. The price point of the SimMakerZ magnetic pedal shifter set is, in my opinion, very reasonable. It comes in at a €99 for the full set, including the bracket and the additional screws you need for the bracket to then mount those pedal shifters on the backside with the quick shifter. It's also important to know they work no matter if you use the original plastic quick release or, like in my case, already the new aluminium, much like higher quality version of the quick release system. So no matter which one you have, it fits both ways. Now replacing the shifters with the new SimMakerZ magnetic pedal shifter set is a different story. The cool thing is that SimMakerZ is offering 2 different kits because the V1 version requires you to solder the new shifters with the cables onto the mainboard in the steering wheel, and the V2 version actually is just plug and play. But still, you have to take apart the whole steering wheel, the front panel, the buttons, get out the motherboard of the steering wheel, and then get rid of the magnets and replace the plugs and put them in. So you need to be a bit careful, but I did it. I was actually honestly really a bit concerned and a bit afraid because I've never taken apart such an amazing piece of technology. But the whole process is pretty straightforward, which is why the second half of this video is fully dedicated to a complete disassemblance of my steering wheel, showing you and explaining you every step. A big shout out and thank you to SimMakerZ for making this possible and for sponsoring me a kit of their magnetic pedal shifter set. If you also would like to order it, you can find the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this review, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button and support the channel a bit. And if you haven't done so far, subscribe for more sim racing content coming up in the near future. So at this point, I also say thank you so much for watching. And I will now leave you with my complete disassembly and assembly of the steering wheel so that you can also do it for yourself. So first of all, make sure you get rid of all your button caps. And then also of the button knobs, but do it carefully so that you're not breaking them apart. And after that, you need to remove those little rubber knobs. And then get a 13mm nut so you can start unscrewing where the knobs have been fixed. Just be aware once you unscrew that there is actually not only the nut but also a little ring below. And you can get those rings out very easily by just flipping the steering wheel like that. Put it all aside. Next thing, we need a little torque to unscrew all of the screws on the front plate of the McLaren steering wheel. You also need to pull out the little red rubber nipples. If you use a plier like that, make sure you use a little sackcloth or something so that you're not scratching or damaging them when you're pulling them off, and also put them aside. Don't lose them. And then we need an 8mm nut wrench so that we can unscrew the tiny nuts from where we had the little red knobs. And also, they consist of a nut plus a small ring, so make sure you don't lose that. And after unscrewing all of that, you can remove the front plate, but beware, a lot of the buttons and knobs might be falling out, so just make sure that you don't lose any of them and put them aside. Now we can take a really good look of what's inside this magnificent steering wheel. Start with unscrewing the main board screws. And also unscrew the tiny 2 screws on the bottom of the screen. Don't worry, you can't break anything apart there. And then there's also a hidden screw below the white broad cable. And once you have got that, just take it out carefully. Be aware there might be some plastic rings that you lose from the knobs, so just put them back on to make sure you're not losing them anywhere. That's the only thing you need to be aware of. And then you can just flip the main board out like that. Hidden below there is the little clamp that holds the one pin in place for the orange pedal plate. So just unscrew those tiny screws. Take it out, and then you can also pull out the pin. And voila, there is the orange pedal plate. We then need to pull out those tiny rubbers that are at the back that should actually dampen the noise of the pedal plate. And then you need to push out the magnet on the right and the left side. And now it's time to loosen up these 4 screws of your quick release, which you can do either now or even before you disassemble the steering wheel. And then it's time to finally put your new pedal shifters in place. Just stick the cable through the hole of the old magnets and then align it with the little bracket you see there where you pulled out the 4 rubber thingies. Just make sure that you align it with the slit bracket there. Once that's in place, use the SimMakerZ bracket and put it on there and align it with the pedal shifters. Just make sure in the beginning to only put in the bolts and just gently screw them in place so that you can realign if something is out of place. And if everything sits perfectly, just screw it tight and also put in the 4 screws that you took out of the quick release. Then it's important to put the cables in place before you put in the main board. Don't forget the little knob that is there for the quick release system. And then get the main board into place. Just watch out for the cables of the new shifters. Get back to screwing the main board in place. Don't forget the hidden one below the bright white cable there. And also the 2 tiny screws for the screen. And then it's time to get rid of the cables of the old shifters. Just pull them out gently by wobbling around a tiny bit and hide them there in the little gap that you can see in your steering wheel. Don't worry, we don't need them anymore and they won't be interfering with anything. Then it's time to gently plug in your new pedal shifter cables and just make sure that you put and hide the cable so that it's not interfering with these white button knobs and also not interfering when you're mounting back the front plate. And then make sure you put back in all buttons in the right position like that. Color combination actually doesn't matter if you're using button caps. And then gently apply the front cover while making sure that the new cables of the new shifters are not in any way and are not blocking the white button knobs there. Screw it all back in place gently. Put in the rings and the nuts for the knobs. Remember, first the ring and then the nut. You can gently screw it on by hand before you start using your nut bolt. Get your 13mm ready and only gently screw it on. Put back on your knobs and do the same with the little knobs. Just make sure there's a tiny disc that you need to align with the slit on top. And then also screw it in place gently. Don't forget the rings and then the nuts. Get back the 8mm nut bolt and just screw them up gently, not too hard. Slide back on the red nipples. And last, the black rubbers over the red nipples. And voila, just make sure every knob, everything is working, every button is where it should be and is responding, and test your new shifter pedals. That was actually it. You are now ready. Enjoy your new magnetic pedal shifter set with the McLaren GT3 steering wheel.